You're listening to a podcast from Faith Baptist Church of Winter Haven, Florida. Our purpose is to worship God and equip believers to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you'd like more information, please visit faithbaptistwh.org.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to yet another inductive Bible study for Ecclesiastes. If this is your first time joining us, we spend the first 30 minutes or so studying the book of Ecclesiastes, and then I take the youth group to another room, and then we figure out how to apply the book of Ecclesiastes to our day-to-day life. And then while we're doing that, you guys stay here and you pray through a number of the items in our prayer guide, which I am very thankful for. It's nice to know that we have a praying church. But we're going to be in chapter 4 today of Ecclesiastes, and this actually marks a turning point in the book. The author of Ecclesiastes up to this point has been very pessimistic about life, hasn't he? He's been very negative. He's been, overall, his point has been that everything is just meaningless, it's pointless, it's futile, it's vanity. So far, that has almost left us with this conclusion that there's almost no value to be found in life. If we hadn't pulled the key from the back of the book and took a peek, we'd probably be feeling that at this point in the book. It feels like there's no value to anything if we're all heading towards the same fate. What does it matter if I'm better off now, if it means that I'm going to have the same fate as the person who's worse off now, right? Now, here in chapter 4, we start to see a bit of a shift. Like most wisdom literature, Solomon starts to drip feed us these better is statements, or this is better statements. He's trying to show us that there is value to be had. He'll continue to point out the ultimate meaninglessness behind the activities, the gifts, all the subjects that he brings up, but that doesn't negate the wisdom and value that they can still have for us in the present. Right? For example, we talked about this back in chapter 2. He said, the wise person and the wicked person, they both die a physical death, don't they? Right? So it almost leaves us to the conclusion of there's no point in getting wisdom. Right? If the wise person and the foolish person, they both die in the end, what's the point to wisdom? Is kind of what we're left with. And now, here in chapter 4, he starts to show us, hey, even though it is meaningless in terms of like, you're still going to die, it's not meaningless. There's still value to be had in these things. So I want us to pay attention for when he uses that word better. It's going to come up in chapter 4 and 5 and on. Now, can I have a volunteer read all of chapter 4 from the New King James Version? Does anybody have that translation for us? All right.
Then I returned and considered all of the oppression that is done under the sun. And look, the tears of the oppressed. But they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressor there is power, but they have no comforter. Therefore I praise the dead who were already dead, more than the living who are still alive. Yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. The fool holds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better a handful of quietness than both hands full together with toil and grasping for the wind. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. Then there is one alone without companion. He is neither son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labor, nor is his eye satisfied with riches. But he never acts, for whom do I toil, deprive myself of good? This also is vanity and a grave misfortune. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though he may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. For he comes out of prison to be king. Although he is born poor in his kingdom, I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who come afterwards will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind.
And then could I have a volunteer read from the CSB, or what we have on the handout on the screen? Abby.
Again, I observed all the acts of oppression being done under the sun. Look at the tears of those who are oppressed. They have no one to comfort them. Power is with those who oppress them. They have no one to comfort them. So I commended the dead who have already died more than the living who are still alive. But better than either of them is the one who has not yet existed, who has not seen the evil activity that is done under the sun. I saw that all labor and all skillful work is due to one person's jealousy of another. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. The fool holds his arms and consumes his own flesh. Better one handful with rest than two handfuls with effort and a pursuit of the wind. Again, I saw futility under the sun. There is a person without a companion, without even a son or brother, and though there is no end to all his struggles, his eyes are still not content with riches. Who am I struggling for, he asks, and depriving myself of good things? This too is futile and a miserable task. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either fails, his companion can lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Also, if two lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm? And if someone overpowers one person, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king, who no longer pays attention to warnings. For he came from prison to be king, even though he was born poor in his kingdom. I saw all the living, who move about under the sun, follow a second youth who succeeds him. There is no limit to all the people who were before them, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind.
All right, well, thank you. I have already highlighted a few sections of this text just to make it a little bit easier for us to answer question number 1. There seem to be several themes brought up in this chapter. What are they, and how might they be linked together to form a larger emphasis? I've tried to highlight out the larger blocks that I see here, but I want you guys to put words to the blocks. All right, so what themes do we see in this chapter? Yeah.
It is better to have companionship, like-minded companionship.
Okay, it's good to have like-minded companionship. It's better than being lonely, apparently. Okay, yeah, yeah. Yep, it's all under the sun, and he's observing this. This is something that he continually has done up to this point. Behold, I've observed all these things under the sun. So again, this is limited to the scope of what he sees on earth and in our sinful world. But what else? Maybe pull one out for blue. That blue block there. Yeah. Yeah, so we see a large motivation for our work is because of jealousy. And I think that has been true as I look around at people who are trying to become better and better salesmen, doctors, whatever it is, right? A lot of times it might be because they have something that I want. I'm jealous of their status, of their expertise. Yeah.
And even that last sentence, and though there is no end to all his struggles, his eyes are still not content with the riches, without even a son or a brother.
So he has the riches, they don't satisfy, and he also doesn't have the companionship that somebody else might have if they weren't chasing the riches. Right? He doesn't even have somebody to share it with. Right? Yeah. What else? I think for blue, we can just say 2 is better than 1. Right? Can we also say 3 is better than 2? Okay. Does it end there? Why not? Yeah. Well, how we interpret this in terms of the context of marriage, right? There's a husband and a wife making a vow to God. So it involves 3 people, right? However, Solomon is not that restricted in how he talks about this here. This is not just talking about marriage. So, can we reasonably keep scaling this up? Is 4 better than 2? Do you guys see where I'm going with this? The more the merrier? Okay, yeah. There's strength in numbers here, right? It's better to have friendships, close-knit relationships, than all these worldly possessions or vanity, meaningless pursuits. By yourself, yeah. Okay. How about red? What themes can we point out in red? I guess I've been saying this about the other section. Yes? Mm-hmm. It's a contrast between companionship and loneliness, right? There's the one who falls without another to lift him up, right? That would be sad if I was in that position, right? So there's a little bit of a contrast. Mm-hmm. What else? Kayla?
Like a purpose?
Right. So,
Like, why is the blue guy struggling for nothing?
right. So there's a purpose given to our companionship, right? 2 are better than 1. Why? Because they have a good reward for their efforts. So something better comes from their work, right? And then he gives us right here in 10 and 11, 4, and then it also, and he's giving us reasons here, right? So 2 are better than 1 because they get a good reward. 4, you have somebody to lift you up, right? Also, you have somebody to keep you warm when you lay down. And if someone overpowers them, one person, 2 can resist him. So you can defend yourself together a little bit, right? Okay, how about green? What do you see in green? Yep, we get the wise youth and old foolish king, that contrast. What else do you see? Right. No one who no longer pays attention to warnings here. So this king has been set in his ways for a while. He's starting to disregard other warnings. But he says there's a second youth who succeeds him, and there's no limit to all the people who were before them, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. They won't remember him. I mean, I don't know that I've heard anybody in church recently talking about John Quincy Adams and his policies while he was a president. Right? We still remember him and we study him, but we don't know about all of our leaders from yesteryears, right? They're not as important to us anymore. Yeah.
I think this goes die.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's look at yellow. I skipped yellow. What themes do you see here? Yes, oppression. So this is following this theme of injustice at the end of chapter 3. Remember the second half of chapter 3 was talking about, I see wickedness in the place of judgment, in the place of justice. Where there should be righteousness, I see wickedness here. And that was really frustrating to him. Now he's saying, again, I see oppression being done under the sun. So it's even worse. What else do we see in this section? Yeah, so those who see the evil, who experience these acts of oppression, he's saying it's better for them to have not even existed. And we're going to get into that because that's a confusing statement right there. Yeah. That's a fair statement to say in light of that. Yes. This is also pre-Christ. Yes. Yep. It's important to keep in mind. Yep. All right. Anything else in the yellow section that sticks out to you guys? Okay. Yeah, I think we hit most of these themes. Now here's the harder question. How do all these blocks relate to each other? Do they relate to each other? Yeah.
I look at it from the experience.
So your take is that this is mostly focused on like his just dwelling on who's going to take the kingdom after him and how he's going to pass that off?
More of a reflection of the journey.
A reflection of the journey up until now.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
looking at his experience from a bird's eye view
Mm-hmm.
of like, I've gone through this, I've seen this, and these are the things that I have learned.
Yeah, I think out of anyone, verse 13, better is a poor but wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer pays attention to warnings. He's probably experienced kings rise and fall in his lifetime, right? So he's drawing from personal experience for sure. He's reflecting on that a little bit. But how else might these blocks fit together as a puzzle? If you had to pick one block to tie all the other blocks to it, what block might it be? Quiet just means you're thinking, and I like it. I'll give you the answer, and you can tell me why. All right? I think the red block, so verses 9 through 12, I think that block kind of ties everything together here. It's almost the main emphasis of the chapter. Why? How does everything else fit together with that? Yeah.
Because the other ones tell you it doesn't matter what is vanity, but the red offers something that has a good reward.
Yeah, so there's a big contrast here. There's this oppression and all these things that are awful, and then we see the vanity of work and even this overwork and laziness contrast here. And then we go into the two are better than one, and so what he's essentially saying is we is better than me. Right? This is how Living Life Backward put it. We is better than me. So he says there's two are better than one. This is good, right? The poor but wise youth, he's wise because he's probably listening to a multitude of counselors back in Proverbs, right? He's actually listening to people who are smarter than him, who are more intelligent than him, who might have connections for him, right? So, and then even back in this blue section, one of the things that we saw was, okay, yeah, it's futile to try to double up your work and gain an advantage if you don't have anybody to share it with. If you're lonely and rich, what does it matter? Isn't it better to be poor but like well-loved and have friendships and family around you and have something a little bit more substantial than just money? So all this seems to get tied together because he's pointing out that we are better together. There, even at the very end, if there's somebody who rises up, where was that at? Yeah, verse 12. And if someone overpowers one person, two can easily resist him. Right? So he's trying to point out to us that we are better together when we do this. And all of those things all the rest of the blocks tie into this a little bit. So let's look at number 2. Let's compare and contrast the oppressor and the oppressed in this first section. We see both of them, but I want us to think hard about what might be similar and different between these two. What is similar between the oppressed and the oppressor? Yes? Everybody there is what? Living. Okay, they're alive. I mean, obviously, it's better to be alive than dead.
Well, no, those who never have been.
Okay.
If they've never been born, will they have changed heaven?
Yeah, that's a good point. If they've never been born, how would they experience the joy of Christ? Or the joys and the pleasures that come from obeying God? So there's absolutely things that the person that never existed misses out on. Yeah. Any other similarities? Yeah.
I was going to the difference.
Okay, go for difference. Yes.
I see it as in
I think we see this in both. Both the oppressed and the oppressor, both has no one to comfort them. Right? If we look back up at the text there, look at the tears of those who are oppressed. So the oppressed has tears. Look, they have no one to comfort them. Right? And then power is with who? Those who oppress them. So now we're looking at the oppressor. They have no one to comfort them. Neither of them have comfort. Right? Yes. Correct. Is there a difference that you're seeing to point out between those two? Yeah. Well,
Oppressed person could be of both.
okay, so you're saying that the oppressor is doing something that's evil and bad, and then the oppressed is not necessarily causing harm. They're the innocent. They're the victim one, right, in this situation. So one is doing evil, and then one is receiving. Okay? Yeah. Yes. Yep, we've got to, I'm going to contrast those two things as well in just a minute. Yep, that's a good one to get ahead to, though. Yes. Any other similarities and differences? Power. All right, so one has power and the other does not. One can actually make a change. They can do something about it. They're not. Okay? Anything else here? Yeah, essentially, one more similarity. They're both going to meet the same fate. Right? They're both going to die. There's nothing that they can do to gain an advantage on that. And then the difference is one has power and authority to make a change while the other does not. One wants something that they don't have while the other is having something taken away from them. Yeah? Correct, yep. So even in how they find the source of power, one is going to God to rely on his power, where the other one is trying to do everything in their own power. Yeah. And guys, I want to take a moment to clarify something in verse 2 and 3. Because when I read this, I was struggling with this. Here it seems that Solomon is saying that it's better to be dead than have to deal with seeing some oppression and wickedness in this world, right? So, yes, to see the bad, that stinks. And I think down deep in our souls, all of us can agree with Solomon on that. It stinks to have to see the oppression, the injustice, the abuse of power. I mean, especially from like a parent abusing a child, that angers us with a holy anger. However, Solomon takes this a step further to emphasize the point that I think can lead people to a wrong conclusion. When he says that it's better to not exist than to see the evil activity under the sun, I want to be very clear about this. This can be used in no way to support the murdering of children. This took a left turn, right? But if it's better to have not existed than to see the evil, could you imagine somebody trying to use this verse to support that argument? Okay, so then we have to be clear about that. We cannot use this to support or bolster an argument to avoid bringing children into the world either. Because these arguments are being made today, I don't want any of us to think that way. Let me just give you a very personal example. When my mom was 16, she got pregnant. And because of how difficult this would have been for her, she was pressured into getting an abortion. Nearly 50 years later, my mom still thinks this is one of the worst mistakes in her life. It has heavily affected her. She's been plagued with depression, anxiety, and worse through the years. When she became pregnant with me, she was forced with a very similar choice. But this time, she resolved not to kill me, even though it meant raising me as a single mom, which was very difficult. I'm very thankful for her decision, and so is she. If given the chance to pass on what she has learned about this, I know that she would tell you, please spare yourself from the misery that comes after abortion. It affects you and those around you. And then to choose the joy that does come from life. There's a good thing, like what Don, you've been saying, there's good things in life. It's not just better to not have existed, right? So I don't want us to get caught up in like, is this world being overpopulated? Is there too much evil in this world, so I should be afraid and not bring my children into this world? No, that's not what Scripture says about children. Every time we see Scripture talking about children, we see children are a gift and a blessing from the Lord. The command to be fruitful and multiply has not stopped, right? God knows the limits of this world, and that is for him to decide. We have to obey him, and we have to think rightly about children. So the point that Solomon is making is not that we should avoid having children and sparing them from seeing and experiencing evil, but rather the emphasis is on his frustration with the evil that he sees. He's pointing that out, and he's saying, man, this is so bad, right? Now, number 3, and I know I'm running behind here. It seems like there's a balance to be struck between laziness and overworking. How do verses 4 through 8 help us to understand that balance? This is something that I have wrestled with a lot. Just a quick raise of hand. Have you struggled trying to find this balance between working too little and working too much? I feel like this is a common man struggle, right? So how do these verses help us to think rightly about work? Right. So God calls us to work. He gave us work before we were sin fallen. It was good. And here we see that there is nothing to be gained from overworking. And I think that we get caught in this trap, right? If I just work more, I'm going to earn more money. I'm going to work myself up to a bit bigger, better job. Guys, I had somebody in Virginia that I was counseling that was working about 80 to 90 hours a week. Now, when it said that they're, let me find this. Who am I struggling for, he asks, and depriving myself of good things. I had to sit with that counselee and help them to think of all the good things that they were depriving themselves of because they were choosing to work, right? Those good things were her relationship with her husband, her relationship with her church, her small group. Like, she was riddled with anxiety. She was so sad. She felt purposeless, right? So, yeah, she was depriving herself of good things because she was choosing a double portion of work. But what do we get for 2 handfuls of work? Yeah. Still not content. Yeah, better 1 handful with rest than 2 handfuls with effort in a pursuit of the wind. You don't gain anything by having the 2 handfuls. Yeah. There's also a command to work here, too. Right? There's the fool folds his arms and consumes his own flesh. So we immediately see the person who doesn't work, they're devouring themselves. They're leading themselves into ruin, right? Better 1 handful, so better than not working, is doing some work, but then also having rest, enjoying your work, right? Not working too much. And then he says better 1 handful than 2, which just is futile. You have 2. You double work, no rest, no enjoyment. Not good, right? I have to ask this question. What good things do we deprive ourselves of in the pursuit of gain or advantage? What good things should be non-negotiable? I'm not going to necessarily ask you guys that, but you can think about this. What good things should be non-negotiable? All right, I want to share this from Living Life Backward, and then I've got to cut us short. I knew this was going to happen eventually. I couldn't get through all my questions. My hope is by talking about more books, it'll inspire some of you to pick up and read, and then start sharing what you're learning with others in our church so that we become a treasure trove of wisdom for Winter Haven. Listen to this quote. I've got it for us on the screen. We realize there is a middle way between being lazy in the here and now and then busting a gut for the future. We find tranquility. We realize that rest and peace are more important than wealth and success. We look down and find that only one hand is full, but now we know that it is more than enough. The Puritan preacher Jeremiah Burroughs suggested that we learn to find contentment by way of subtraction rather than addition. People normally think that to achieve contentment, you have to attain whatever it is you desire. Our possessions need to be raised up to the level of our desires. But the Christian has another way to contentment. He can bring his desires down to his possession. G.K. Chesterton is reported to have said exactly the same thing. There are 2 ways to get enough. One is to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. I really loved that. Guys, and I actually read this book. This is one of Kayla's favorite books. It's called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. If you've not read this and you want to learn about contentment, you should read this book. The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment by Jeremiah Burroughs. It is a wonderful, challenging read. It is good for us to be content with what the Lord has given us. So feel free to look through the rest of those questions on your own and to do those application and discussion questions to further set this into your life and practice this. But I'm going to take my students and we're going to go talk through this together.